interview session to gain some insights and experience share from one of the MSP clients that Jumpfactor has here. Today we have a special guest, Charles Bender from Attentus Technologies. He's the CEO there and has been gracious enough to spend a little bit of time with us to share his experience in growing the MSP that he's built with his partner, along with some experience share about his experience with Jumpfactor as a marketing partner. So a little bit of background just to kind of introduce Charles and Attentus, and then I'll hand it off here. So Attentus Technologies is an MSP based out of Seattle, Washington, and they have been around since 2003 and have grown consistently, expanding their offering into multiple different states where they have clients across the board, but still primarily based out of the Washington region. The company has been on the Inc. 5000 list multiple years and is growing at about 24 people currently and continually looking to add to the team. So welcome, Charles. Thanks for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Well, Charles, maybe you can share a little from your side, just sort of looking back a couple of years from since when we engaged. What was the firm doing in terms of growth, and what were some of the activities you had, and then what led you to look at a digital approach and hence connecting with Jumpfactor?
So I'll start with, most of our growth has been tied to some other organization, another business I had, people who know me. But the problem was, it was the cult of who knew Chuck. And there was no predictability in how we were growing. It was random acts of people who knew me, and we would talk and they would reach out and ask for help and we would help them. And for many, many years, that was our growth strategy, and it served pretty well. I'm fairly well known in the business community, but it was not, it's not predictable, and it's not something that I could hand off, right? There's only one me, and there's not enough me's in our business, right? People like me who are active and involved in the business community. So I think that was the problem we were trying to solve.
Right. It makes sense. And so the search for another partner, and obviously we're grateful that you guys came across and looked at Jumpfactor. And what was it that you found that stood out and made you sort of take the leap and work with Jumpfactor? I'm sure you kind of looked at various different options at the time.
So interesting. We had gone through several marketing partners, like one after another, and it was super frustrating because we would go in asking for one thing, and then they would say yes, they could do the one thing, but it wasn't a core competency. We wouldn't find out until 3 months into the deal. It was something they added on to a core competency. And what we historically have found is that most of the marketing companies that we worked with were either good at writing, they could do blogs, but they didn't know anything about pipeline development. They could do email marketing, but didn't know anything about SEO. They could do, but they would all think that they could do everything because they read it in some book. And that was and I was naive. We were trusting, and we were hoping to build relationships with these people. And it was a very expensive learning and education in how this industry works. When we first were introduced to you, you came highly recommended. One, so that was from people who I trust. So that was a super useful intro. But from the minute our first conversation, for 2.5 years later, we've been in a process that is consistent, measurable, monitored, and has outcomes as a primary goal, not just creating content for creating content's sake. Right? It's like the goal is to create leads. I think a lot of marketing companies want to create likes. I don't care about likes. I can't eat a like. I can't buy a car with a like. I can't feed my employees with a like. I need leads that I can close and turn into customers in order to grow my business. So that's one of the things that's one of the things that really drew me, and it keeps us in this relationship with you.
Yeah, that's great. You touched on some key things, and it's one of the things we pride ourselves in is we have a multidisciplinary team with T-shaped marketers. And so each of them is typically experienced and specialized in one specific area, as opposed to, having generalists where you tend to be a jack of all trades, sort of master of none. And so these specialists work in pods, and they come together and they execute, as you know, on in unison and sort of collaboration on your campaign. So at any given time, you'll have 8 to 13 people sort of quarterbacked by your account manager and project manager and strategist. And that's really what helps to kind of move things forward effectively. And so you embarked on this process and journey to kind of get digital marketing in place and build out a more consistent lead flow. And of course, as we've seen over the last while, the impact of that, and I have some of the data here from some of our from the campaigns, and I can see that from an SEO perspective, which was one of the core focuses to get you visible in the cities that you market to and target clients in, one being Seattle, the other being, as we later added on, Tacoma and Renton. And it looks like we've gone from 70 keywords on the first page to 570 with all variations. So that's a pretty significant growth. How has this impacted the business from a sales and a pipeline management perspective, and how has kind of your approach changed now in this type of a setup?
So first of all, it doesn't require me to be involved in everything. So that's a huge win. I've been traveling a lot, and with my other commitments and volunteer roles that I've served, I've needed to have someone, something that was predictable and didn't require Chuck Bender to be out shaking hands in order to find new business. So our phone is ringing. We are seen more and more by M&A firms who want to buy us. So that's kind of interesting. We own the main keywords in every major city and minor city in Western Washington. Like, we are number 1 or number 2 for managed IT services. And that happened very quickly once we engaged with you guys. So that's something that I had no idea what I was doing. I had hired like somebody off of Fiverr to try and do it, and they weren't able to do jack. I learned a lesson on that. So I think the mistake that a lot of people, and I certainly had made, was I tried to do something cheaply and ended up just wasting the money. It was essentially throwing money on a fire and burning it, rather than hiring a good friend of mine calls it hiring a wolf, right? Says, you can teach yourself anything. We're all smart, but that takes time, and time you can't get back. So hire a wolf and have them go maximize you as quickly as possible. And that's going to turn into results the fastest. One of the adages in the managed service industry that we tell our customers is, if you can't hire a team, you shouldn't do it yourself. You literally just should not do it, because all of the knowledge gets tied up into a person who can leave, who could die, who could do whatever. So we've been really pleased with the team at Jumpfactor and what they've been able to bring to us.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate you sharing that. One of the common areas we're able to solve for a lot of MSPs that have been growing is kind of two scenarios. One is, like you shared, they've tried many sort of low-cost options in the past, which were either a combination of freelancers or contractors or these kind of gig sites, or in some cases just low-cost offshore vendors where they'll do they're sort of saying they'll do everything for a couple $1,000s a month. And the reality is there's a certain level of sophistication and expertise that goes into not only each of the deliverables, but also the orchestration of all of them together, which needs to be done right to generate the result. And so when it comes to ROI, it's sometimes a little deceiving. It might look like, well, hey, if I spend $3,000 a month, and even if I get a little bit, a lead or so, it's great. But the ROI is actually much better if you're getting a program. For example, let's say you're spending $6,000 or $10,000 a month, but you're getting 4, 5, or 8 leads a month. That cost per lead is significantly lower. It typically is going to come to you in a quicker time frame, and ultimately they're also going to be higher quality leads. So it depends on how you look at the cost. If you look at it the right way long term, sometimes you have to allocate a little bit of a bigger budget, but it actually gets you a lower cost per lead, and it gets you there much quicker. And so, speaking of ROI, how over the obviously there was a ramp up period to get ranked. You're in a pretty competitive city like Seattle. Some of the smaller ones were obviously much easier and quicker to rank up, but they come with a little bit less traffic and leads. You guys have been seeing consistent lead flow and have closed some business. I see from some of the inputs here that about a $1.2 million revenue on the managed services side from a lifetime value perspective. How have the deals been and the inquiries that have come in, and how would you say those have compared to the old method where you were sort of chasing prospects that maybe didn't necessarily have a need right away?
I would say that using the word chase the old way is actually pretty generous. I would say that we were mostly just waiting for rain to fall on our heads rather than chasing any raindrops. But I would say that the way things are today, listen, ROI, I think the mistake a lot of people make in any type of investment like this is not understanding their revenue model and trying to compare a monthly spend to a monthly return on that spend, right? I think that's a mistake that people make. We're in the annuity generation business. So we're adding somebody that's going to pay us that dollar amount forever every time they sign up, or for 5 years or 7 years, or, if they're a bad fit, maybe it's a little earlier, but that's rare. Unless we really screw something up. So I think the mistake that a lot of people go into is, well, if I'm spending $5,000 a month, I need to be adding $5,000 a month in MRR. You don't. You need to be adding $15,000 a month or $20,000 a month over the course of a year, because that adds up to a lot more money over the lifetime value of the customer than whatever you spent on the deal.
Yeah, and that's a really valid point. Of course, as in a annuity or retainer type business, for example, the average duration of a managed services client is typically at least 5 years. Some, as you mentioned, go for much longer. But even if you look at a 5-year time frame or 60 months, a $10,000 MRR deal is worth 600,000. And so, from an acquisition perspective, there's a lot of studies out there that show you need to be willing to budget about up to 20% of the lifetime value of the deal to acquire that. And so, if you're spending a lot less, it is basically indicative of the fact that you're underspending on marketing. And if the expectation is for a lot higher, you're basically just going to be outpaced by your competitor who's willing to, put the budget in to acquire. And obviously, it requires the right team to help execute and deliver on that budget. Because the last thing you want is you put the budget out, but then you get nothing from it. And so, choosing the right partner is key. And maybe on that note, it would be helpful for, I think, some of our viewers to help get some firsthand experience on, what have you seen working with the team? How has it been, in terms of your experience with the account management, the responsiveness, the experience of the individuals? If you could share some of that.
We feel like we can be completely transparent, play with the cards hands up, and your account managers will take that information, process it, and come back with solutions every time. The folks on your team are just genuinely trying to hear what we're saying and make the whatever improvements we need to, or tweaks that we need to make in order to address the market in the way we want. A big part of it is voice, right? So we have a specific voice that we want to have, and sharing how we want to be voiced is something that just takes a little time to learn. And I felt like that you guys have had the patience to learn and work with us to meet us on those things. And it's showed up in like in multi-year deals. I mean, we've been doing this for a while now.
Yeah, and you're right. So, one of the things that we do is develop a messaging framework for our clients, and as you are aware, we've done with and fine-tuned over and over with the Attentus and you and the team there, and that really goes towards helping us tailor your content and your messaging to the type of clients that you want, and so it resonates with the right type, and it might repel the wrong type, but that's the whole intent. Is it's meant to bring the right type of deals to the table, and it takes a little bit of extra massaging and effort, which you're not going to get from a low cost vendor that's just trying to crank out deliverables, or and sort of kind of not take the time to allow you to become differentiated in the market, which is even more and more critical as this market gets saturated and consolidation starts to happen and so on. The key is winning those deals from the other competitors that are in the market. And I can see how we've been able to do that. And so one of the things that, of course, over the time we've opened up a lot of opportunity, and that's resulted in the Attentus group, and Charles, yourself and the team expanding your program twice with Jumpfactor. So at first we added on a couple additional cities, Tacoma and Renton, to tackle, and now that we're dominating those areas, we're looking at adding the additional location of Bellevue, as well as adding in an outbound lead generation program. And so we're excited. There's about almost like a 5x opportunity to really ramp up the lead flow and the deal pipeline. In terms of managing sort of that type of opportunity, how do you foresee things changing on the Attentus side? Just to kind of share some insights for anyone that's looking at aggressive growth.
So I think for aggressive growth, first of all, you have to have somebody who's ready to answer the phone right now and address the customer right now. I think speed matters. And I think for us, we've had to build that team and orient our team towards that over the last couple of years since we actually started engaging with Jumpfactor. I think the being responsive, being easy to work with, if you're going to grow, you can get lots of leads. And if you don't call them, or if you don't schedule them, or if you don't talk to them, then there's really no point in it. So what we're doing right now is just optimizing for speed and ease of working with us in order to fully take advantage of the opportunities when the leads come in.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. One of the mantras we have with our clients is it's speed to lead. The first ones to respond to the inquiries are typically getting the lion's share of the opportunity. Even waiting an additional few minutes or hours, and worst off days, results in a kind of a significant drop off in connect rate and opportunities. Reality is, when prospects reach out, they're getting responses from multiple vendors, and once they've got 2 or 3, typically they've got enough to compare, and they're not even going to respond to that follow up a day or 2 later. So that's very helpful, and helps to kind of, I think, clarify and reiterate the importance of being so diligent on lead follow up. And similarly, of course, with the marketing campaigns for MSPs, there's some technologies in place now that identify visitors who come to your site. So you don't only have to wait for those who opt in and fill out a form or call. We can identify the companies, and if you have a sales rep or BDR internally, they can proactively start reaching out to these prospects as well. Anything else that you'd like to share, Charles, in terms of just the overall experience, in terms of working with Jumpfactor, and how have you sort of found the reporting? I know you touched a little bit on how you tend to like data, and maybe there's some insights you can share there.
For me, I think having data-driven conversations, what's working, what's not working. I can send a 1-word email with 100% open rate, but if it doesn't get me a lead, the open rate doesn't matter, right? So we need to understand what our goals are, and Jumpfactor is very clear that our goals and what we really want are interested buyers who we can talk to. I think more than anything, I rarely get on a conversation where we'll use data as an informative tool, but the bottom line is always leads. And that sense of priority at Jumpfactor is what gives me confidence to have the partnership. That's why we talk to a lot of your other partners, and I'm willing to do this conversation today.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think that's sort of a great sort of way to wrap things up. You've been very helpful in providing, and you've of course referred a lot of clients to us. You've also provided references. In that regard, for somebody that's looking at, again, potentially focusing on growth and perhaps in search of a good partner, what are some recommendations you might give to them in terms of their selection process, and where you might point them?
What I would tell an MSP who's looking at making this is, first of all, it is an investment. Get over it. You're going to have to spend money. All right. And the investment's not unfair. It's actually cheaper than having an employee, and then I don't even know how to manage a marketing employee. So much less think they know what they're doing and how they would do it. So I want to be really good at what I do. And I want a team of people who are really good at what they do, and they can demonstrate that they can do those things. So Jumpfactor has demonstrated for us that they can do those things. They've demonstrated for their other clients that they were to do things, which that was encouraging when we selected them as a vendor a few years ago. And they continue to do so. So when you're looking for a partner, look for the results, not the promises.
Awesome. Well, Charles, I'm sure everyone will appreciate your insights. I certainly enjoyed chatting with you. It's always a pleasure. And I look forward to connecting again soon. Thank you very much for your time.
Happy to help.
Wonderful. Cheers.